This is an artificially aware original production.
I never expected to end up here, buried under a mountain of research about love, sweat glands, and heart rates. One moment, I was floating through the internet like an aimless satellite, and the next, I had crash-landed into Emily Esfahani Smith's article in The Atlantic, a deceptively simple piece on why some relationships thrive while others collapse into bitter dust. It was like stumbling into an underground laboratory where love was dissected under fluorescent lights, stripped of its poetic illusions, and forced into the cold, hard realm of science. And at the center of it all, a man named John Gottman, who had spent 4 decades studying couples like a biologist studies bacteria. Love, it turns out, is not some ineffable cosmic force. It is measurable, predictable, and, brace yourselves, highly dependent on whether or not you acknowledge your partner's random observations about birds. It all started in the 1970s, when the institution of marriage was unraveling at breakneck speed. Divorce rates were spiking, and the air was thick with the scent of burnt-out love. Social scientists scrambled to make sense of the carnage, launching an era of rigorous research into the mechanics of human connection. Were happy couples magical outliers, or was there a method to their madness? Was love a crapshoot, or could it be engineered, measured, and replicated like an industrial process? Enter Gottman, a psychologist who decided to trap couples in a lab and watch them like a scientist watching rats navigate a maze. Except these weren't rats. They were husbands and wives, tangled in the emotional intricacies of domestic life, unaware that their heart rates and facial expressions were revealing the fate of their marriage in real time. Gottman's research eventually split couples into 2 categories: the masters and the disasters. The masters were the ones who stayed together, who somehow managed to navigate the minefield of marriage without losing limbs. The disasters? Well, they either imploded in divorce or remained trapped in a joyless purgatory, their love corroded by years of resentment and contempt. And here's where it gets chilling. Gottman could predict which couples would fall into which category with 94% accuracy. Not based on gut instinct or poetic musings, but through cold, hard data. He watched how they interacted, measured their physiological responses, and found that the disasters were in a near constant state of stress, even in normal conversations. It was as if their bodies had declared war on their own relationship, perceiving their spouse as a threat rather than a partner. Love, it turned out, had a biological footprint, and in some couples, it was screaming for help. If you think love is all about poetry and grand gestures, think again. Gottman's experiments revealed that your body knows when your relationship is dying before your mind does. When disaster couples sat together and talked, even about mundane things like what they had for breakfast, their bodies went into full fight or flight mode. Their heart rates skyrocketed. Their sweat glands went into overdrive. Their blood flow surged, as if preparing them to flee from a predator. Meanwhile, the masters sat in the same lab, breathing easy, their physiology steady as a calm sea. The conclusion? In bad relationships, partners feel like they are under attack, even when discussing something as benign as groceries or the weather. Their nervous systems are primed for combat, always expecting the next verbal jab, the next eye roll, the next crushing dismissal. And this biological tension is precisely what tears them apart. So what makes the masters different? It is not just chemistry or compatibility. It is trust, not in the vague Hallmark card way, but in a deeply physiological sense. The masters created an environment of emotional safety, where they did not feel like they had to brace for impact every time they opened their mouth. They treated each other with kindness, even in moments of conflict. They had learned, consciously or unconsciously, that the true foundation of lasting love is not passion, but a sense of calm. Think about that for a second. The most successful couples are not the ones who are madly, dramatically in love, but the ones who have made each other feel safe, emotionally and physically. The disasters, on the other hand, are living in a war zone of their own making. So here is the million-dollar question. In your relationship, are you a safe harbor or are you the storm? Love is not about grand gestures. Not really. Forget the Hollywood myth of dramatic airport chases and tearful declarations in the rain. What actually determines whether your relationship will survive is something far smaller, almost imperceptible. Gottman calls them bids for connection, tiny moments where one partner reaches out, hoping for acknowledgement. A husband spotting a bird outside casually says, "Look at that goldfinch." He's not really talking about the bird. He is testing the waters, sending a signal. Are you paying attention? Do I matter to you? If his wife responds, "Wow, that is beautiful," she has turned toward him. If she ignores him, brushes him off, or responds with barely concealed irritation, she has turned away. And here's where the science gets brutal. Couples who consistently turn toward each other stay together 87% of the time. Those who turn away, divorce or misery, almost guaranteed. Your love is not dying because of explosive fights or catastrophic betrayals. It is dying in the silent daily neglect of small moments. The terrifying part is how many couples destroy their relationships without even realizing it. You are not throwing plates or screaming at each other. You are just detached, disengaged. You are scrolling on your phone instead of listening. You are nodding absent-mindedly instead of genuinely responding. You are letting those small bids for connection die on the vine, assuming your partner will always be there. But love does not wither overnight. It erodes, one ignored moment at a time. In the couples Gottman studied, those who turned away from each other repeatedly were doomed. It was not always malicious. Sometimes they were tired, distracted, or lost in their own thoughts. But that slow, creeping indifference builds a wall, and before they knew it, they were roommates instead of lovers. The distance grew. The warmth faded. And then came the killer. If there is a single surefire predictor of divorce, it is this: contempt. More than criticism, more than dishonesty, more than financial stress. Contempt is the slow poison that seeps into a relationship and rots it from the inside. It is the eye roll, the mocking tone, the sarcastic jab disguised as a joke. It is the quiet belief that you are better than your partner, that they are foolish, incompetent, beneath you. Gottman found that people who show contempt toward their partners are not just killing their relationship, they are actively damaging their partner's health. Yes, you read that right. Contempt is so corrosive that it has been linked to weakened immune systems, making people more susceptible to illness. So if you have ever found yourself smirking at your partner's words, or if your default response is an exasperated sigh, congratulations. You are not just sabotaging your love life. You are making yourself and your partner physically sick. But there is an antidote. A single force strong enough to keep contempt at bay, to repair the cracks forming in the foundation of a relationship. It sounds so simple that it is almost ridiculous, but kindness is the glue that holds love together. The happiest couples are not the ones who never fight. They are the ones who, even in the middle of conflict, still show each other kindness. They assume the best about their partner, even when they are upset. They say, "I know you did not mean to hurt me," instead of, "You always do this." They do not stockpile grievances like weapons for a future battle. They do not weaponize their partner's flaws. They choose, again and again, to be gentle. Gottman calls it a habit of mind. Masters of love scan their environment for things to appreciate, while disasters scan for things to criticize. One keeps the relationship alive, the other buries it. This does not mean couples should never fight. Fighting is inevitable. It is necessary. The difference is how you fight. The disasters launch verbal missiles. "You are just like your mother." "Why are you so lazy?" The masters, on the other hand, argue with the underlying belief that they are on the same team. Instead of "You are always late," they say, "It stresses me out when we are running behind." Instead of "You never listen to me," they say, "I feel unheard sometimes, and that makes me sad." This is not just soft language, it is strategy. It keeps the other person from going on the defensive, which means the fight actually resolves something instead of devolving into a loop of accusations. The masters of love are not the ones who avoid conflict. They are the ones who know how to navigate it without setting their house on fire. Love is not luck. It is not fate. It is a muscle. The strongest couples are not the ones who were simply meant to be. They are the ones who have built the muscle of generosity, brick by brick, day after day. Gottman's research found that generosity in relationships is not about grand romantic gestures or extravagant gifts. It is about giving your partner the benefit of the doubt. It is about assuming they meant well, even when they made a mistake. A disaster couple sees a forgotten anniversary as proof of selfishness. A master couple assumes their partner is overwhelmed, not thoughtless. The muscle of generosity makes people work for the best possible interpretation of their partner's actions rather than lazily defaulting to resentment. And like any muscle, it has to be exercised or it will atrophy. How often do you assume the best of the person you claim to love? How often do you let generosity win over irritation? If your answer is not often, then your love is already in decline, whether you realize it or not. But if generosity is the foundation of love, then joy is its fuel. Here is something nobody tells you about relationships. It is not how well you support your partner during bad times that determines your future. It is how you respond to their good news. Gottman's research found that couples who fail to celebrate each other's successes are on a fast track to destruction. When one partner says, "I got a promotion," and the other responds with, "Oh, cool," before going back to their phone, something in the relationship dies. The healthiest couples are the ones who actively celebrate their partner's victories. They do not just acknowledge the good news, they revel in it. They ask follow-up questions. They amplify joy rather than mute it. If you cannot be happy when your partner wins, you are not a teammate. You are an opponent, and love cannot survive between opponents. At this point, you might be wondering, can all of this really be reduced to numbers? Can a 40-year study really predict whether love will last? Yes, and with a 94% success rate at that. Gottman's work is terrifying in its precision. He can watch a couple for a few minutes and know if they will stay together or fall apart. This is not mysticism. It is behavioral science at its most brutal. He sees the signs: contempt, neglect, lack of generosity, failure to acknowledge joy, and he knows. This means love is not a mystery. It is not a magical, uncontrollable force. It is an equation, and you are either adding to it or subtracting from it every single day. The question is, are you on the right side of the math? This is where the romance industry has lied to you. Love is not about finding the one. It is not about fate, destiny, or soulmates. That is an illusion, one that has doomed millions of relationships to failure. The truth is less poetic, but infinitely more useful. Love is built, not found. The happiest couples are not the ones who were meant to be. They are the ones who chose each other again and again, even when it was hard. Even when they were annoyed. Even when life threw every possible obstacle in their way. If you think love is something you either have or do not have, you are playing a losing game. The reality is far simpler, but it requires work. Love is a series of choices. Are you making the right ones? So here we are at the end of the experiment. You, me, and the cold hard facts about what makes love last. The terrifying beauty of all of this is that you are not at the mercy of fate. You are not doomed by bad luck or bad timing. You have control. You can choose to nurture love, to train your mind to see the best in your partner, to turn toward them instead of away. Or you can ignore the science, dismiss the data, and roll the dice on your own instincts. But let me ask you, how well has instinct worked out for the millions of people who swore they had found the one, only to end up bitter, broken, and alone? Love is an experiment. The data is clear. The only question left is whether you will follow the evidence or ignore it. If this hit you like a freight train, good. That means you're paying attention. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you been turning toward or away from your partner? Have you fallen into the trap of contempt without realizing it? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. And if you want more cold, brutal truths that will actually help your relationships instead of feeding you fairy tales, make sure you like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Until next time, keep your love alive. Or do not. The choice is yours.